The night had settled softly over Mountain View. Outside, the tall trees whispered as a cool breeze moved through their leaves, carrying the scent of distant ocean air. Inside Google's headquarters, the bright glass windows reflected a man. Sitting alone in his spacious office, his silhouette framed by the faint glow of the city lights. It was Sundar Pichai, the CEO known worldwide for his calm leadership and visionary mind. Yet tonight, the strong, admired leader looked smaller, almost fragile. His shoulders were slightly hunched. His hands trembled as they hovered above a stack of letters on his polished oak desk. He tried to blink away the tears that had welled up in his eyes, but they slipped out anyway, tracing silent paths down. His face, each tear carried unspoken worries and the heavy weight of responsibility that most people could never imagine. Sundar had always appeared invincible to the world, the man who stood calmly on stage introducing new technologies, the man who smiled gently in front of cameras. But alone in his office, he was simply a father, a son, a husband. A human being who carried burdens heavier than he would ever share. The letters before him were from young students across the globe. They wrote to him with dreams, hopes, and desperate pleas. Some talked about wanting to study but lacking money. Some wrote about their struggles with illness. Others shared stories of losing parents and clinging to education as their only hope. Sundar read each word slowly, as if he could hear their voices echoing inside his heart. He felt their pain as though it were his own. It reminded him of his own childhood in Chennai, how he had walked to school under the hot sun, wearing shoes that pinched his feet, how his parents had sacrificed everything so he could study. He wiped his eyes again and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as if searching for answers among the lights. He wondered if he was doing enough, if his position and power really meant something beyond the stage and the headlines. He had donated to many causes, helped build schools, funded scholarships, but tonight, it felt like he was standing at the edge of a vast ocean, and no matter how much he gave, it felt like a small drop. Just then, he heard a faint knock at the door. Startled, he quickly reached for a tissue, trying to hide the evidence of his tears. The door creaked open, and a small face peeked inside. It was his son Arjun, holding a small toy car in one hand. Arjun had his mother's gentle eyes and Sundar's quiet spirit. He was supposed to be sleeping, but something must have pulled him here to his father's side. "Papa, are you okay?" Arjun's voice was soft, but it cut through Sundar's heart like a sharp knife. Sundar opened his mouth to reply, but found no words. He simply looked at his son, and for a moment, he felt completely vulnerable. He realized in that instant that no speech, no public statement, no donation could compare to the raw truth of this moment. His son had caught him crying, something he never wanted him to see. Arjun stepped forward slowly, his small feet padding against the carpet. He placed the toy car gently on the edge of the desk and climbed onto his father's lap without waiting for permission. Sundar held him close, feeling his son's heartbeat against his chest. Arjun's tiny hands touched his father's face, wiping the tears away with an innocence that carried more comfort than any applause or award ever could. "Why are you sad, Papa?" Arjun asked again, this time pressing his cheek against Sundar's. Sundar closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He thought of all the carefully crafted answers he usually gave to journalists and board members, but none of them fit here. Arjun, he felt he owed nothing but the simple, naked truth. "Papa was just thinking about many people who need help," he whispered, his voice rough and uneven. "Sometimes Papa feels he can't help enough." Arjun pulled back and looked into his father's eyes with a seriousness far beyond his years. "But you always tell me that even a little help is good help," he said softly. Sundar felt a sharp warmth spread through his chest, a mix of pride and heartbreak. He realized that the wisdom he had tried to give his son was now coming back to hold him up when he needed it most. He hugged Arjun tighter, and in that moment, he felt an unexpected surge of strength. He had been drowning in doubt, questioning the value of his actions. But here was his son, reminding him that no act of kindness was too small. Sundar felt as though the room had shifted, the darkness lifting just enough for him to breathe. Arjun yawned and laid his head on Sundar's shoulder, his small body already starting to relax. Sundar gently rocked him, listening to his slow breaths. Outside, the moon had climbed higher, casting a gentle light through the office windows. Sundar looked at the letters on his desk again. They no longer felt like accusations of his inadequacy, but like quiet calls to continue trying, no matter how hard it felt. As Arjun drifted off, Sundar knew he had to keep going. He needed to do more than write checks and sign initiatives. It had to lead with heart, to show people not only his mind, but also his humanity. He realized he needed to bring his team closer, to involve his family, to create programs that reached deeper into lives rather than only touching the surface. Pressed a gentle kiss on Arjun's forehead and whispered, "Thank you, my little teacher." He felt a deep gratitude swell inside him, one that filled the cracks left by exhaustion and self-doubt. Arjun stirred slightly, mumbling something in his sleep, and Sundar felt another tear slip down his face. This one not from pain, but from an overwhelming sense of love. He knew tomorrow would be another day of meetings, decisions, and relentless challenges. But tonight, holding his son, he felt a kind of quiet certainty that he hadn't felt in years. It was as if the universe had chosen this moment to remind him of the simplest, most powerful truth, that every act of kindness, no matter how small, creates ripples that go further than we can ever see. As the clock ticked past midnight, Sundar stood up carefully, carrying Arjun in his arms. He looked back at his desk one last time before turning off the lights. The letters waited patiently, as if they, too, believed in him a little more now. Sundar stepped out of his office, each step feeling lighter than it had in a long while. He felt the warmth of his son against his chest, and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to believe that he was not alone in this journey. He reached the hallway, the soft glow of nightlights guiding his way home. He paused for a moment, looking at the quiet corridor stretching ahead. The future was uncertain, the work endless, but he had found a new source of strength tonight, a small voice, tiny hand, a gentle reminder of why he started in the first place. Just as he turned toward the elevator, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was an unexpected message that made his heart race. His eyes widened as he read the sender's name. It wasn't a colleague, nor a friend. It was someone from his past, someone he hadn't heard from in years, and the words on the screen were enough to stop him in his tracks. He looked down at Arjun, then back at the message, his mind flooding with memories and questions. The hallway suddenly felt longer, the shadows deeper. He knew that this message would change everything he thought he understood about his life and his work. With a deep breath, Sundar tightened his hold on Arjun and stepped forward, not knowing that the real test of his strength and heart was just beginning. Sundar stood frozen in the hallway, the gentle hum of the building's nightlights echoing like a distant heartbeat in his ears. He held Arjun tightly, feeling the rise and fall of his small chest against his own, but his eyes stayed locked. On the glowing phone screen, reading the message over and over as if trying to convince himself it was real, the message was short, yet heavy enough to weigh down his entire world. "I need to see you. It's urgent, Anjali." Anjali. That name alone carried 1,000 unspoken stories, memories, and long-buried emotions. She had been his classmate and closest confidant during his college days in India. She was the one who had seen him when he was just Sundar, not the celebrated CEO, not the icon on magazine covers. Back then, he was a quiet, curious young man who dreamed of touching the stars, but couldn't even afford a decent backpack. Anjali had been there during his loneliest nights in the hostel, sharing cups of tea under the campus lights, encouraging his wildest dreams with a soft, unwavering faith. They had lost touch as life carried them into different worlds. Had moved abroad, chasing scholarships and job offers, eventually finding love and building his family. She had remained in India, focusing on her own dreams, disappearing into the chapters of his life that he thought were permanently closed. He hadn't heard from her in years. Not a message, not even a rumor from old friends. And now, suddenly, in the quiet of this vulnerable night, her words had come like a ghost from the past. Shaking the fragile balance he had fought to maintain, he stepped into the elevator, his mind spinning with questions, doubts, and a rising sense of fear he didn't fully understand. The metal doors closed softly behind him, and he leaned his head against the cool wall. Arjun stirred in his arms, a small hand reaching up to touch Sundar's cheek, as if sensing his father's turmoil even in sleep. Sundar closed his eyes, trying to steady his breathing, to focus on the warmth of his son and not the cold unknown waiting behind that message. By the time he reached his car, Sundar felt like he had aged a decade. He placed Arjun gently in his child's seat, securing the belt with shaky fingers. As he drove home, the city lights blurred past, but Sundar barely noticed. His mind replayed old memories with Anjali like an old film reel, her laughter in the library, the way she used to scribble encouraging notes in his textbooks, her soft voice calling his name across the courtyard. He remembered how she once told him, "You will change the world, Sundar. But don't forget, the world begins with one person at a time." He had never forgotten those words, though he had hidden them deep inside. Under layers of boardroom strategies and global ambitions, now they echoed through his mind louder than any applause he had ever received. When they reached home, his wife Nirya was waiting at the door. She had been reading a book, her hair falling gently over her shoulders, her eyes soft with love and concern. She took Arjun from Sundar's arms without a word, sensing something heavy in the air. She gave him a searching look, but did not press. Instead, she kissed Arjun's forehead and carried him inside, whispering a lullaby that filled the hallway with a quiet warmth. Sundar stood there for a moment, his hands still resting where Arjun's head had been. He looked at Nirya, disappearing into Arjun's room, and felt a sudden wave of guilt wash over him. Here was the family he had built, the life he had promised to protect, and yet a single message from the past had shaken his foundation to the core. He wondered if opening that door again was an act of betrayal or an inevitable confrontation with his own history. After Nirya came back, she placed a hand on his arm and guided him to sit on the edge of the bed. She didn't ask questions immediately, instead offering the kind of silent comfort that only years of deep companionship can teach. After a long pause, she spoke softly. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Sundar. What happened at the office?" Sundar hesitated, staring at his feet, the words piling up inside him, heavy and chaotic. Finally, he handed her the phone, unable to voice the storm raging inside him. She read the message, her eyes moving slowly, and then she looked at him with an expression that was not anger or fear, but a deep, thoughtful sadness. "Anjali," she whispered, as if tasting the name on her tongue. She knew of her. They had spoken about college days during the early years of their marriage.
Oh,
Late-night talks where secrets slipped out like stars falling into the sea.
Nirya.
Had always known there were pieces of Sundar's heart that belonged to the past, but she had trusted him enough to let them be. Nirya set the phone down and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Do you want to see her?" she asked, her voice steady, though her eyes glistened under the dim light. Sundar felt a lump in his throat. He didn't know the answer. Part of him wanted to run away, to shut that door forever, and cling to the safety of his present life. Another part, deeper and more restless, felt that he owed something not just to Anjali but to himself, to the boy he had been and the dreams he had shared with her under moonlit skies. "I don't know," he finally whispered, "but something about her message feels urgent. I don't think it's just about the past." Nirya nodded, her fingers tracing small circles on his palm. "Then you need to find out," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "But promise me one thing. Don't get lost in yesterday. Remember where your home is." Sundar felt tears rise again, but this time they were not from fear or guilt. They were from the overwhelming love of a woman who could look at his past without jealousy, who could see his deepest wounds and still choose to stand beside him. He leaned forward and buried his face in her lap, and she stroked his hair slowly, like a mother comforting a scared child. After a long silence, she stood and pulled him up gently. "Go freshen up," she said softly. "We'll talk more in the morning. For now, rest." Obeyed, moving mechanically toward the bathroom. Under the warm stream of the shower, Sundar tried to clear his mind. But Anjali's words kept flashing behind his closed eyelids. He wondered what kind of crisis could push her to reach out after all these years. Was it health? Family? Or something even more complex? Something connected to the man he had become? When he finally crawled into bed, Niarya was already asleep, her hand resting lightly on his side as if to anchor him to the present. He watched her for a while, studying the lines on her face, the gentle rise and fall of her breath. He realized how much he owed to her quiet strength, how many times she had kept him grounded when the world tried to sweep him away. As the night deepened, Sundar's mind wandered restlessly. He thought of the letters in his office of Arjun's innocent words and Evangeli's sudden reappearance. All these threads tangled into a knot inside his chest. He felt like he was standing at a crossroad between the past and the future, each step forward heavy with consequences he couldn't yet see. Finally, he drifted into an uneasy sleep, his dreams filled with flashes of college corridors, whispered secrets, and a pair of kind eyes watching him across a crowded cafeteria. At dawn, Sundar woke to find his phone buzzing on the nightstand. His heart jumped as he saw a new message from Anjali. "Please meet me tomorrow at 7 p.m. at the old tea shop near the university gate. I have no one else to turn to." He read it twice, then sat up slowly, his hands trembling slightly. Niarya was still asleep beside him, and for a moment he considered deleting the message, pretending it had never come. But he knew deep inside that he couldn't run from this. Something told him that this was not just an echo from the past. It was a call to face a truth he had long avoided. He stood quietly, moving to the window to watch the first rays of sun spill across the city. The world was waking up outside. Unaware of the storm building in his heart, as he looked out, he thought of Arjun's words again. Even a little help is good help. Maybe this was a chance to help an old friend, or maybe it was something more. Something that would change the path of his life forever. He heard Arjun's soft footsteps behind him, and turned to see his son rubbing sleep from his eyes. Arjun looked up at him and smiled. A pure, unconditional light that cut through the fog of confusion in Sundar's mind. Sundar knelt down and hugged him tightly, drawing strength from the simple warmth of that small embrace. As he held Arjun close, he realized that whatever awaited him at that tea shop, he needed to face it with an open heart. Because no matter what, the greatest lesson he had learned from his father, from Niarya, and now from Arjun, was that running from the past only made its shadow longer. When Niarya woke, they shared a quiet breakfast. She didn't ask more questions, and he didn't offer explanations. Instead, they shared gentle glances, silent agreements passing between them like invisible threads. After breakfast, Sundar took Arjun to school, holding his hand a little tighter than usual, as if memorizing each step, each laugh. After dropping Arjun off, Sundar sat alone in the car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, feeling the weight of the coming evening press down on him like a heavy blanket. He knew he could still choose not to go. He could ignore the message, focus on his meetings, and bury himself in work. But deep down, he knew that if he turned away now, he would always carry the unanswered question like a stone in his chest. He took a deep breath and started the engine. The road ahead felt both terrifying and necessary. He didn't know what he would find at that tea shop, but he knew he had to go. Because sometimes, the only way to truly move forward is to face the places where you began to listen to the voices you once trusted, and to remember the promises you made to yourself when you were young and full of dreams. As he drove away, the sun rose higher, painting the sky in shades of gold and soft blue. The world moved on around him, cars rushing past, people hurrying to work but for Sund. Every second felt like a heartbeat echoing in a silent room. That evening, as he stood in front of the old tea shop, his heart pounded in his chest, like a distant drum. He took one last look at the sky, inhaled deeply, and stepped inside, not knowing that the next moments would not only uncover long-hidden secrets, but would test the very core of who he believed he was. The tea shop had not changed much since the old college days. Its walls were still the faded mustard yellow, carrying the smell of decades of boiling chai leaves, sweet milk, and silent stories exchanged in hushed tones. The wooden chairs creaked under even the lightest weight, and the small fans overhead turned lazily, stirring the thick, comforting air. As Sundar stepped inside, a wave of memories crashed over him so suddenly that he nearly stumbled. He saw flashes of himself as a thin, shy young man sitting in the corner with Anjali, sharing samosas and dreams, scribbling on tissue papers when they couldn't afford notebooks. He remembered watching the rain together from this very window, talking about inventions in big cities, laughing at how far those dreams seemed. He felt the echo of her laughter now, bouncing off the walls like an old song. For a moment, he almost turned back toward the door, the urge to flee stronger than ever. But he forced himself to take a step forward. At a corner table, facing the street, sat Anjali. Her hair was now streaked with gray, but her face still carried the quiet warmth that had comforted him during so many lonely nights long ago. She looked up as he approached, and their eyes locked, two worlds colliding in a single glance. Sundar felt as though time had cracked open, letting the past spill into the present in a flood of feelings he had buried for too long. Anjali stood slowly, as if unsure whether she should reach out or stay still. Sundar hesitated too, the weight of unspoken words filling the small space between them. Finally, she offered a small, trembling smile and gestured for him to sit. He pulled out the chair, his fingers brushing against hers briefly, sending a silent shiver through his spine. They sat across from each other, the air between them thick with years of silence. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They only looked at each other, as if trying to find pieces of the young students they once were hidden behind the lines and tired eyes. Anjali was the first to break the silence. "I almost didn't message you," she said softly, her voice carrying a brittle edge, as though it might shatter at any moment. "But then I thought of that night, under the banyan tree, when you promised me you'd never turn away from a friend in need." The memory hit Sundar like a wave. He remembered sitting with her under that giant tree on campus, the moonlight slipping through the leaves, their hands clasped together as they vowed to always support each other, no matter where life took them. He felt the old guilt rise in his chest, the guilt of losing touch, of letting life's current pull him away from people who had once anchored him. "Anjali, why now?" Sundar finally whispered, his voice hoarse. "Why after all these years?" She lowered her gaze to the table, her fingers twisting a small, worn handkerchief in her lap. For a moment, she looked like the young woman he used to know, strong yet fragile, carrying the world's weight on her shoulders while somehow still managing to smile. She took a deep breath and looked up, her eyes shimmering with tears. "Because I have no one else," she said, her words trembling. "My husband passed away 2 years ago. My parents are gone, and my son, he needs help. He's brilliant, Sundar. Just like you were. He dreams of studying abroad, of creating things that make life better for people. But I don't have the means. I tried everything, scholarships, loans, part-time jobs, but nothing has worked. And when I saw your face on the news last week, something inside me told me to try, even if it meant swallowing every ounce of pride I had left." Her voice broke on the last word, and she covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. Sundar felt as if the floor had vanished beneath him. He saw not just an old friend in distress, but a mirror of his own past, of his own mother's silent sacrifices, of the nights she had gone hungry to save enough for his books. A sudden image of Arjun flashed in his mind, his innocent eyes, his small hands wiping away Sundar's tears the night before. He thought of all the children whose letters had been spread across his desk, each one a plea for a chance. But now this wasn't just any letter. This was Anjali. This was the woman who had believed in him when even he had doubted himself. Reached across the table, taking her hand firmly in his. "Anjali, you should have come to me sooner," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I would have helped. I will help. Not just because of the past, but because it's the right thing to do." She shook her head slowly, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't want to be that person," she whispered. "The one who only reaches out when they need something. I wanted to protect the memory of what we had, the purity of it. But you were never just a memory," Sundar said, squeezing her hand tighter. "You were part of the reason I am who I am today. Your faith in me shaped me in ways I never told you." This isn't charity. It's me keeping my promise. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, tears mingling with soft smiles of old familiarity. It felt like the years melted away in that moment, leaving only two young dreamers sitting across from each other once more. Finally, Anjali pulled back slightly, wiping her face. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thin, battered folder. Inside were copies of her son's certificates, his drawings, his essays. Sundar leafed through them, his eyes widening with each page. The boy's ideas were not only brilliant, but deeply human. Focused on helping communities, on creating accessible technologies for rural areas. Sundar felt a spark inside him, the same spark he used to feel when he first dreamed of changing the world with a simple search engine. He looked up at Anjali, a determined light now burning in his eyes. "Not only will I support him," he said firmly, "I want him to come to Mountain View. He can shadow me. Learn directly from the best minds at Google. We'll set up a mentorship program for him and for others like him. This can be bigger than just one boy. We can build something that supports many young innovators." Anjali's eyes widened, her lips parting in shock. She shook her head as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Sundar, that's too much. I didn't come here to ask for all this. But this is what needs to happen," Sundar interrupted gently. "You taught me to think beyond myself. Now it's my turn to pay it forward." She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs that carried years of fear, pain, and finally, relief. Sundar stood up and moved beside her, wrapping her in a gentle embrace. The tea shop owner watched quietly from the counter, perhaps recognizing Sundar, or perhaps simply sensing the sacredness of the moment. The rare sight of two souls reconnecting across a bridge built by shared pain and unwavering faith. When Anjali finally calmed, she looked up at Sundar, her eyes red but filled with a new light. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means. For me, for him." Sundar nodded, his own eyes moist. "I think I do," he said quietly, "because once upon a time, someone believed in me too." They left the tea shop together, stepping into the soft twilight. The sky had turned a deep blue, and the first stars began to appear, shimmering like small promises against the vast canvas. They walked slowly, side by side, not needing to fill the silence with words. It was enough to simply be there, sharing the weight and the light of what had just unfolded. When they reached the corner where they would part ways, Anjali turned to Sundar, holding his hands tightly one last time. "I hope one day you let Arjun know how big your heart is," she said softly. "You will learn not just from your success, but from your kindness." Sundar felt her words settle deep in his heart. He thought of Arjun's eyes, so full of questions and wonder. He realized that his son deserved to know not just the leader the world admired, but the man who had once needed help. The man who had cried, the man who had chosen to stand by others in their weakest moments. As he watched Anjali walk away, her silhouette blending into the evening shadows, Sundar felt both lighter and heavier at the same time. He turned back toward his car, 1,000 thoughts swirling in his mind. Tonight had not just been about helping a friend, it had been about rediscovering a part of himself he had almost lost in the noise of titles, meetings, and global headlines. He knew the coming days would not be easy. There would be questions, resistance from his team, logistics to manage. But he felt a quiet fire inside him, fueled by the memory of a young woman's unwavering faith and a small boy's brilliant dreams as he drove home. The city lights sparkled around him, no longer just bright dots but tiny reminders of all the people whose lives intersect in unexpected ways. He thought of Nearya and how she would react, of Arjun, and how he would see his father after hearing this story. He felt nervous, but also hopeful, perhaps for the first time in a long while, when he finally parked in the driveway. He sat for a moment with the engine off, the quiet night wrapping around him like a soft blanket. He took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of life in his veins, and stepped out of the car inside. Nearya was waiting in the living room, her eyes immediately locking onto his face, searching for clues. Sundar walked to her, sat down slowly, and without waiting, began to tell her everything, every detail, every tear, every word spoken in that small tea shop as he spoke. He watched her eyes fill with emotions, worry, relief, pride, and a deep, gentle love that held him together when his voice cracked. She held his hand tightly, listening without interrupting, her own tears falling silently down her cheeks. By the end, they sat together in quiet understanding. Neria rested her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, feeling the warmth seep into the deepest, coldest corners of his heart. But even in that peaceful moment, Sundar felt an unspoken tension rising, a distant thunder in his mind. He knew this journey was just beginning, and that this choice would ripple far beyond their small family. The past had been faced, but now came the harder part, turning promises into action, turning private pain into a public mission. As he closed his eyes and leaned into the softness of the moment, a small sound came from the hallway. He opened his eyes to see Arjun standing there, half awake, rubbing his eyes. Sundar's heart tightened as he realized that the time had come to share his truth with his son. He smiled gently and opened his arms, calling Arjun closer. Arjun hesitated, sensing something big and new in the air. Before shuffling forward and climbing into his father's lap, Sundar hugged him tightly, pressing his lips to Arjun's hair, inhaling the simple, comforting scent. He knew that this choice to let his son into his inner world would change everything. And as Arjun looked up at him with wide, curious eyes, Sundar felt the world shift around them, preparing for a story that would test their strength and love more deeply than ever before. The living room was wrapped in a deep, almost sacred silence. As Sundar held Arjun close, Neria sat beside them, her fingers tracing soft patterns on Sundar's back, as if she was silently urging him to find the courage to open a door that had long been locked. Arjun, with his small legs tucked beneath him, looked up with wide, searching eyes, his innocence shining like a lantern in the night. Sundar felt his heart tighten with a mix of love and fear, knowing that once he spoke, nothing would ever be the same. He swallowed hard, his throat dry as if he had been walking through a desert for days. The words felt like stones resting on his tongue, heavy and difficult to move. But as he looked into Arjun's eyes, he saw the same unguarded openness that had comforted him the night before in the office, the small hands that had wiped away his tears without judgment, without question. That memory gave him the push. He needed Arjun, Sundar began, his voice low and careful, like a fragile thread stretched between two cliffs. There is something I need to tell you. Something about Papa that I think you're ready to understand. Arjun blinked, tilting his head slightly, the way he always did when he was trying to figure out a new puzzle. Okay, Papa, he said softly, leaning his cheek against Sundar's chest. Sundar took a deep breath, feeling Neria's hand tighten reassuringly on his back. He glanced at her, and she gave him a small, tearful nod. He turned his gaze back to Arjun. A long time ago, when Papa was young, there was someone very special who believed in me when nobody else did, he said, his voice trembling slightly. Her name is Anjali. She helped me dream big, even when it felt impossible. She was kind and strong, and she gave me the courage to keep going. Arjun's eyes widened slightly, his small fingers gripping Sundar's shirt tighter. He didn't interrupt, but Sundar could feel his heartbeat quicken against his own chest. She sent me a message recently, Sundar continued, his voice cracking. She needs help now. Her son, who is about your age, wants to learn and make the world a better place, just like I wanted to do when I was young. But they don't have the support they need. So Papa promised to help them. Arjun's brow furrowed, the wheels in his young mind turning fast. So, you're going to help him like she helped you? He asked, his voice innocent and clear. Cutting straight to the heart of it, Sundar felt a tear slip down his cheek. He nodded slowly. Yes, my little teacher, he whispered, using the nickname he had given Arjun after the night in the office. I'm going to help him, because when someone helps us, it's our job to help others too. That's how the world becomes better. Arjun was silent for a moment, his eyes studying Sundar's face with a seriousness that didn't match his age. Then, without warning, he wrapped his small arms around his father's neck and held him tightly. Sundar felt the warmth rush through him, washing away the fear that had been gnawing at his bones. I'm proud of you, Papa, Arjun whispered, his voice muffled against Sundar's shoulder. "I want to help too." Those words broke something inside Sundar, not in a painful way, but like sunlight breaking through a heavy fog. He felt Neria's hand slide up to cup the back of his neck, her fingers trembling slightly. "Eight," she pressed, her forehead to his, closing her eyes, and in that shared quiet they all breathed together, as if their hearts had synced into one rhythm. After a long time, they pulled back. Arjun's face was bright, his eyes sparkling with a mix of excitement and curiosity. Neria wiped her tears and managed a small smile. "I think you have a strong partner now," she said softly, her eyes flicking between Sundar and Arjun. Sundar laughed weakly, the sound shaky but genuine. It felt good to laugh, to feel the sharp edges of his fear soften in the warmth of his family. He reached up and ruffled Arjun's hair, watching his son giggle and squirm. That night, after Arjun had gone back to bed, Sundar and Neria stayed up talking in low voices, the moonlight slipping through the curtains like soft fingers. They spoke of Anjali, of her son, of the possibilities that lay ahead. Neria listened patiently, her eyes sometimes shining with concern, sometimes with pride. They debated logistics, how to bring the boy to Mountain View, how to handle the media if the story ever surfaced, how to make the project sustainable so it wouldn't just be about one child, but a ripple effect that reached many more. At one point, Neria leaned her head on Sundar's shoulder and sighed deeply. "You know," she said, her voice almost a whisper, "this isn't just about them, it's about you too. I see how lost you felt lately. Of everything has been crushing you. Maybe this, helping him, creating something bigger than yourself. Maybe this is what your soul needed all along." Sundar felt the truth of her words sink into him like rain into dry earth. He hadn't realized how much he had been longing for something that felt truly human, something beyond numbers, beyond strategy meetings and investor calls, something that reminded him why he had started dreaming in the first place. They finally went to bed as the first hints of dawn began to color the sky, pale and hesitant. Sundar lay awake for a while, listening to the quiet breaths of Neria beside him, feeling the rise and fall of her chest. He turned and watched her face. Her features softened in sleep, and felt an overwhelming gratitude. She had always been the quiet strength behind every decision, every risk, every triumph. As he drifted off, he dreamed of Arjun running through fields of tall grass, laughing, his hands stretched toward the sky. Beside him ran another boy, Anjali's son, their laughter mingling, echoing into the horizon. Sundar watched them from a distance, feeling his chest swell with something too big to name. And in the dream, he felt a hand slip into his, warm and steady. He turned to see Anjali, her eyes kind and knowing. She nodded once, and Sundar woke with tears in his eyes. The next morning arrived bright and clear, as if the world itself was blessing the path ahead. Sundar rose early, moving with a new kind of purpose. He dressed carefully, choosing a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled up, a silent promise to himself to stay grounded. As he stood in front of the mirror, he saw not just the CEO the world adored, but the young boy from Chennai, the friend under the banyan tree, the father who had let his son see him cry. He saw all of them woven into the man standing there now. He gathered his things and stepped into the kitchen, where Neria was already preparing breakfast. She turned when she heard him, her smile lighting up the room like the first sunbeam through clouds. Arjun sat at the table, swinging his legs, his eyes bright with curiosity. "Are you going to meet the boy today?" Arjun asked immediately, his voice bubbling with excitement. Sundar nodded, pouring himself a glass of water. "Yes," he said softly. "Today I will start making arrangements. It might take time, but we'll do it together." Arjun clapped his hands, grinning so wide, his cheeks puffed out. Neria laughed, a sound that made Sundar's heart feel light. Ate together, each bite tasting richer than it had in months, maybe years. It felt like they were not just sharing food but sharing a vision, a silent vow to be each other's strength. After breakfast, Sundar left for the office, the sun painting golden streaks on the pavement as he drove. He felt a strange mixture of nervousness and excitement twisting in his stomach. When he arrived at Google, the security guard greeted him with a cheerful good morning, and Sundar responded with a warm nod, a small but genuine smile tugging at his lips. He took the elevator up, watching the floors tick by, reflection in the mirrored walls, showing a man on the verge of something transformative. As he stepped into his office, he paused at the door, taking in the view the letters still spread across his desk from the night before. The photos of Arjun and Nuriya framed neatly along the shelf, the soft hum of his favorite desk lamp. He felt as if he was seeing it all for the first time, through new eyes. He sat down and opened his laptop, pulling up a blank document. His fingers hovered over the keys, and for a moment, he simply breathed. Then slowly he began typing. A detailed proposal outlining a mentorship and innovation program for underprivileged youth, inspired by Anjali's son. He wrote about giving them a platform, pairing them with top engineers, helping them turn their ideas into solutions that could change their communities. Each word felt like a small act of healing, stitching together the torn parts of his heart. As the proposal grew, so did his sense of clarity, of purpose. He imagined future students sitting in his office, their eyes wide with wonder, their minds buzzing with ideas. He imagined Arjun there too, watching and learning, growing into a man who would understand that leadership was not about power, but about compassion. Hours passed without him noticing. His team peeked in occasionally, surprised to see him so absorbed, his usual calm intensity now burning with a quiet fire. When he finally paused to look at the clock, he realized the day was almost over, leaned back in his chair, stretching, his stiff shoulders, feeling a bone-deep exhaustion, but also an unexpected energy humming through his veins as he saved the document. A notification popped up on his screen. It was an email from Anjali. He clicked it open, his heart pounding. It was short, just a few lines. Thank you for yesterday. I don't have the words yet, but please know. You have given me and my son a second life. He's so excited to meet you. We both are. Sundar closed his eyes, resting his forehead against his folded hands. He felt the weight of her gratitude wrap around him, gentle yet firm, like a protective shawl. He thought of Arjun and of Nuriya, of his own parents in Chennai, who had sacrificed so much to give him his first chance. When he finally stood up to leave, he carried with him not just his bag but a renewed sense of who he was and who he wanted to be. As he stepped out into the corridor, the evening light bathed the walls in a soft glow, turning the ordinary space into something almost sacred. As he waited for the elevator, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Nuriya. We're waiting for you? Arjun wants to tell you something special. Sundar felt a smile spread across his face, slow and deep. He stepped into the elevator, the doors closing with a gentle sigh, and he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would not face them alone. Tonight, a new chapter was beginning, one filled with unknowns, but also with love, with purpose, and with the quiet, unstoppable power of family. But as he descended, his mind drifted to Anjali's son, to the boy's bright eyes and big dreams. He wondered what would happen when they finally met face to face, what stories they would share, and what new journey would unfold from that first handshake. He didn't know yet that this meeting would reveal a secret so unexpected it would test everything he believed about himself and his past. And as the elevator doors opened, Sundar stepped into the evening air, unknowingly walking straight toward a revelation that would shake the very foundation of his life. The evening air outside Google's headquarters was crisp and filled with the gentle hum of the city beginning to slow down, as if the world itself was taking a soft, collective breath. Sundar walked slowly to his car, each step feeling like a delicate balance between two worlds, the polished, sharp edge of the corporate realm and the tender, vulnerable world of his heart and family that had been quietly calling to him in the background for years. As he slid into the driver's seat, he paused, hands resting on the steering wheel. He let his gaze wander toward the horizon, where the sky was melting into deep purples and soft oranges. He thought of Arjun waiting for him at home, of Nuriya's steady love, of Anjali's quiet strength and her son's bright, fragile hope. Each name felt like a gentle tug at the threads of his soul, pulling him forward into a future that was both thrilling and terrifying. The drive home felt longer than usual. The streets blurred under the glow of streetlights and the faint music. From passing cars drifted in and out like half-remembered dreams. Sundar's mind replayed every word from Anjali's email, every detail of her son's achievements. He could almost hear the boy's excited voice, see the wide eyes that carried so many questions and so much raw electric potential. When he finally pulled into the driveway, he saw the warm glow of light spilling from the windows of his home. It looked like a small lighthouse, guiding him back after a long, stormy voyage. He took a deep breath, gathering the strength he knew he would need tonight. Stepping out, he noticed the small garden to the side. The plants Arjun and Nuria had planted together. Their leaves shimmered gently in the soft wind, as if whispering encouragement. Inside, Arjun was waiting at the entrance, hopping from foot to foot with a barely contained excitement that made Sundar's chest tighten with tenderness. As soon as he saw his father, he ran forward, his small arms wrapping tightly around Sundar's waist. "Papa! Papa! You're finally home!" Arjun exclaimed, his voice bubbling with joy. "Come quickly. I have something to show you." Sundar bent down, scooping Arjun into his arms, feeling the boy's warmth flood into him like sunlight through an open window. Pressed his forehead to Arjun's, smiling as he felt the familiar little hands cup his face. "What is it, my little teacher?" Sundar asked softly, his voice carrying a quiet tremor he didn't bother to hide. Arjun giggled, his eyes sparkling like tiny stars. "Come, you'll see," he said, wriggling out of Sundar's arms and grabbing his hand, pulling him inside with surprising strength. Nurj stood by the kitchen doorway, her face lit up with a soft, knowing glow. She watched as Arjun dragged Sundar into the living room, her eyes following them with a love so deep it seemed to fill the whole house. In the living room, on the coffee table, sat a small model made of cardboard, paper, and bits of string. It was messy and uneven, but it carried an unmistakable charm. Sundar bent down, examining it closely. It looked like a miniature community center, tiny windows, a courtyard, even a small garden drawn in crayon. "I made it with Mama's help," Arjun said proudly, bouncing on his heels. "It's a place where kids like Anjali's son can come and learn and play and eat good food, and maybe you can come and teach them too." Sundar felt his throat close up. He reached out, tracing the little windows with his finger, feeling the fragile edges of cardboard under his touch. He glanced at Nuria, who stood silently now, her hands pressed together under her chin, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Did you think of this all by yourself?" Sundar asked, his voice breaking. Arjun nodded vigorously. "Yes, because you said even a little help is good help. And if we all help a little, it becomes big help, right?" Those words hit Sundar with the force of a tidal wave. He felt his knees weaken and sank down onto the floor beside the table, his hand covering his mouth. He looked at Arjun, who watched him with wide, expectant eyes, and then at the small model, a simple, childish vision that somehow carried more heart and truth than 1,000 boardroom strategies. Nuria stepped forward then, kneeling beside Sundar and wrapping her arm around his shoulders, rested her head against his, her breath warm and steady. "He's been working on this all day," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He said he wanted to help you make the world better, Papa's way." Sundar let out a sound, part laugh, part sob, and pulled Arjun into his arms again. He hugged him so tightly that Arjun squealed and giggled, but he didn't pull away. Sundar buried his face in Arjun's hair, the scent of soap and crayons and sunlight filling his senses. "You are so much braver than Papa ever was," Sundar whispered into his son's ear. "You remind me of why I started dreaming in the first place." Arjun giggled again, pressing small kisses to his father's cheek, as if sealing a promise between them. Nuria's fingers threaded through Sundar's hair gently, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. There was no weight of expectations, no ghosts of the past, only this pure, unstoppable bond of family, of shared dreams blooming quietly in the warmth of their living room. After a while, they sat together on the floor, Arjun explaining every part of his model with animated hand movements and sound effects. Sundar listened intently, asking questions, nodding, and encouraging every detail. Nayura watched them, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and relief. Her eyes occasionally drifting to the small photos on the walls, memories of simpler times, but of milestones they had crossed together. When Arjun finally grew tired, Nirya led him to bed, leaving Sundar alone with the little model. He sat there, staring at it, the room silent except for the faint sounds of the night drifting in through the windows. He thought of all the children's letters he had read, of Anjali's son, of Arjun's unwavering faith. He thought of the young man he had been, the boy who had once stared up at the stars, daring to believe that one day he might reach them. As he sat in that quiet, Sundar's phone buzzed softly. He picked it up and saw another message from Anjali. "He's so excited to meet you tomorrow. He stayed up all night making notes and sketches to show you. I've never seen him this alive. Thank you, Sundar, truly." Sundar set the phone down, slowly, feeling the words echo through the chambers of his heart. He turned back to the model and traced the tiny garden drawn in crayon. A sudden thought struck him, a possibility so wild and big that it almost scared him. He stood abruptly, moving to his study where his laptop sat waiting. He opened it, hands moving quickly, pulling up documents, notes, contacts. The mentorship program he had started planning in the office was just the beginning. What if they could build an actual space, a real version of Arjun's model, a place where children from every corner of the world could gather, learn, eat, play, and dream freely? A place where technology met humanity, where no child felt unseen or unsupported. As he typed, the idea began to shape itself into something tangible, something alive. His heart raced, his fingers flying across the keyboard as if guided by an invisible force. Each sentence felt like planting a seed, each paragraph like watering it with faith and hope. He imagined classrooms buzzing with excitement, workshops filled with small hands building big things, gardens blooming under wide open skies. By the time he paused, the first hints of dawn were brushing against the edges of the window. His body was exhausted, but his mind and soul felt electric, alive in a way they hadn't in years. He leaned back, staring at the screen, the outlines of a dream staring back at him. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. Nirya stepped in quietly, wearing a soft robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked at the screen, then at him, her eyes wide with a mix of surprise and admiration. "You didn't sleep?" she said gently, though there was no judgment in her voice, only quiet understanding. Sundar shook his head, a small, almost boyish smile tugging at his lips. "I couldn't," he admitted. "I think I finally know what we need to do." Nirya walked over and wrapped her arms around his shoulders from behind, resting her chin on his head. She read a few lines on the screen, her eyes softening, her breath catching. "This is beautiful," she whispered. "And it's so you." Sundar reached up, placing his hand over hers. "It's us," he corrected softly. "You, Arjun, Anjali, everyone who has ever believed when it was easier not to." They stayed like that for a long moment, the pale morning light growing brighter, the birds outside beginning their gentle chorus. It felt like standing on the edge of something vast and new, something that could change not just their lives but the lives of countless others. Finally, Nirya kissed the top of his head and whispered, "Come rest, even just a little. You'll need your strength for tomorrow." Sundar nodded, saving his work carefully. Yes. As he stood, he glanced one more time at the screen, a small flame of determination flickering in his chest. He knew that what awaited him the next day, meeting Anjali's son, revealing these plans, introducing this vision to his team, would be more than just another step forward. It would be a leap into a new way of living, of leading, of loving. As he crawled into bed beside Nirya, she curled up against him immediately, her warmth melting away the last bits of doubt and exhaustion. He closed his eyes, his mind still, buzzing with images of classrooms and gardens, of children laughing and learning, Arjun's tiny hands holding cardboard dreams, just before sleep claimed him. He felt Nirya's hand find his, their fingers intertwining effortlessly. He squeezed gently, a silent promise echoing in his heart, but deep inside, beneath all the hope and excitement, a quiet question lingered, unspoken but sharp. Was he truly ready to open himself up to the world in this new, vulnerable way? And could he protect his family from the storms that would surely come? As his breathing evened out and sleep finally pulled him under, Sundar did not know that the next day would bring a revelation so unexpected, so deeply personal, that it would test every lesson he had learned and every promise he had made. The sun rose gently over Mountain View, flooding the city in a soft golden light that painted everything in a warm, almost sacred glow. It was as if the universe itself had decided to bless this day. A day that Sundar felt would become a turning point, not only for him, but for all the lives about to be touched by the ripples of his choices. Inside his home, quiet was peaceful, but alive with a gentle anticipation. Sundar sat on the edge of the bed, buttoning his simple white shirt, his mind alive with 1,000 thoughts. Neria moved behind him, her fingers combing gently through his hair, her touch grounding him, steadying the storm brewing inside his chest. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Every small gesture was a quiet promise that she would stand with him. No matter where this journey took them, Arjun burst into the room, his small feet pattering across the wooden floor, holding a plush, a folded piece of paper above his head like a precious treasure. "Da-da!" he shouted, his voice echoing with pure joy. Sundar turned, catching Arjun as he ran into his arms. Arjun handed him the paper eagerly, his eyes glowing with pride. Sundar unfolded it slowly, careful not to tear the delicate edges. It was a drawing. A large, colorful building filled with children. Each child had a bright smile, some holding books, others playing with balls or planting flowers. Above the building, Arjun had written in big, uneven letters, "A place for all kids to dream big." Sundar felt his throat tighten painfully as he studied each crayon stroke. He looked at Arjun, his heart swelling so powerfully it almost hurt. "This is beautiful," he whispered, pulling Arjun close and pressing his forehead against his son's. "Thank you for believing in Papa." Arjun giggled, his small hands pressing against Sundar's cheeks. "Always tell me to dream." "Big Papa," he said earnestly. "I think you should too." Those simple words landed like a quiet thunder in Sundar's chest. He realized in that moment that he had spent so many years pushing forward, building, leading, achieving, but somewhere along the way, he had forgotten what it felt like to dream purely. Like a child, without fear or expectation, Arjun's innocence cracked open a space inside him that had been sealed for too long. After breakfast, they set out as a family, driving together toward the small university tea shop where everything had begun. Sundar drove slowly, his hands steady on the wheel, but inside, his thoughts moved like waves in a restless ocean. Beside him, Neria watched the city pass by, her eyes calm but thoughtful. In the back seat, Arjun hummed softly, his head leaning against the window, his mind already weaving new stories and possibilities as they pulled up to the tea shop. Sundar felt a sharp tug of nostalgia, the scent of boiling chai wafted out, wrapping him in memories of simpler times. Today, though, the tiny shop felt like a portal, a doorway into a new future that stretched beyond the limits of his imagination. Anjali stood outside with her son, thin, bright-eyed boy clutching a folder to his chest. His eyes were wide, scanning everything with hungry curiosity, absorbing every detail like a sponge. Sundar stepped out of the car, his heart hammering in his chest. As he approached, the boy's gaze locked onto him, and a shy, hopeful smile spread across his face. "Hello, Uncle Sundar," the boy said softly, his voice careful and sweet. Sundar bent down to meet him eye to eye, his own eyes shimmering with emotion. "Hello," he replied gently. "You must be Rahul. I've heard so many wonderful things about you." Rahul nodded, his fingers clutching the folder even tighter. Beside him, Anjali placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, her face a portrait of cautious hope and deep love. Neria stepped forward then, taking Anjali's free hand in both of hers. Their eyes met, and in that silent connection, 1,000 words passed between them, words of shared sacrifice, of motherhood, of quiet resilience. Arjun stepped closer, his eyes wide with wonder. "Hi, I'm Arjun," he said, his voice bold. "And bright, do you like to draw too? I made a whole building design for Papa." Rahul's eyes lit up instantly. He loosened his grip on the folder and held it out, opening it carefully to reveal pages filled with sketches, complex diagrams of solar panels, community gardens, classrooms filled with gadgets and tools. Sundar and Nirya leaned in there, eyes moving from page to page in astonishment. "These are incredible," Sundar said softly, his voice catching. "You have a gift, Rahul. A very special one." Rahul's cheeks turned pink with pride, and he looked up at Sundar, his eyes shining. "My mama always tells me that if I want to make the world better, I have to start small," he said.
I like
Planting one tree at a time? Sundar felt something deep inside him shift, as if a hidden door had swung open. He stood up slowly, looking from Rahul to Arjun, then to Anjali and Nirya. In that circle, he saw everything he had been searching for. Not in boardrooms, not on stages, but right here in these small, unassuming souls who carried the real power to change the world. He took a deep breath and spoke, his voice firm but gentle. "Rahul, I would like you to join me at Google. I want you to see how ideas turn into real things, to learn from the best people we have. And together, we'll build this place you both imagined, a place where every child, no matter where they come from, can learn and dream without limits." Anjali gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, tears spilling from her eyes. Rahul looked like he might float into the sky from pure joy, his entire body trembling with excitement. Nirya stepped forward, placing a hand on Sundar's arm, her own, eyes wet with tears but glowing with pride. "Really?" Rahul whispered, almost afraid to believe it. Sundar knelt again, his hand resting on Rahul's shoulder. "Really," he said, "and you won't be alone. Arjun will help too. You two can dream together, build together." Arjun threw his hands up in excitement, laughing and hugging Rahul tightly. The two boys spun around, their laughter ringing. Out across the small tea shop courtyard, cutting through the air like sunlight after a long storm, Anjali stepped forward then, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to thank you, Sundar," she said, her hands shaking. "You've given my son, you've given us, a new life." Sundar stood and pulled her into a gentle hug, his own tears finally slipping free. "You believed in me when I had nothing," he whispered into her hair. "Now it's my turn to believe in you, in Rahul, in all the dreams still waiting to be born." As they stood there, the sun climbed higher, turning the courtyard into a pool of warm, golden light. Nirya joined them, wrapping her arms around both Anjali and Sundar. In that circle, it felt as though the universe had paused to watch, to listen, to honor the quiet miracle unfolding in this small corner of the world. When they finally parted, they made their way to the car, the boys chattering excitedly in the back seat, already sketching new ideas on scraps of paper. Anjali sat beside Nirya, the two women talking softly, occasionally reaching for each other's hands, sharing stories of worry and hope, of nights spent wondering if they were enough. Sundar drove, his eyes occasionally flicking to the rearview mirror to watch the boys, a soft smile playing at the edges of his lips.
ow.
For the first time in years, he felt a deep, quiet peace settle in his chest, a knowing that he was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. As they pulled up to Google's campus, the boys pressed their faces against the windows, their eyes wide with wonder at the towering glass buildings, the people moving like small, busy streams of possibility. Rahul looked at Sundar with a mix of awe and excitement. "Do you really work here every day?" he asked, his voice a hushed whisper. Sundar laughed, the sound rich and free. "Yes," he said, "soon so will you." They stepped out and Sundar led them through the main entrance. Employees paused to watch, some recognizing the CEO immediately. Others just curious about the unusual sight of a group entering with such raw, contagious energy. Sundar didn't rush, explained every detail to the boys, showing them labs, cafeterias, quiet thinking rooms. Rahul and Arjun followed closely, their eyes bright, asking question after question. As they entered Sundar's office, Rahul stood still for a moment, taking it all in, He moved toward the large window that looked out over the city, pressing his small hands to the glass. Sundar watched him, his heart swelling with a quiet pride that felt bigger than any award, any headline. Rahul turned slowly, his eyes thoughtful. "Uncle," he said, "when I grow up, I want to build places where no child ever has to stop dreaming because they don't have enough." "Duh." Sundar stepped forward and knelt in front of him, placing both hands on the boy's shoulders. "Then, let's start building it together today," he said softly. "Right now." Rahul's face lit up, and he nodded firmly. In that moment, it felt as if a silent contract had been signed, one written not with ink, but with the purest kind of faith and shared purpose. As the sun began to set beyond the glass, turning the office into a glowing cathedral of light, Sundar felt Nirya's hand slip into his. He turned and saw Arjun beside her, his eyes shining. Anjali stood behind them, her face softened by gratitude, and something deeper, a sense of belonging, of being seen after years of feeling invisible. Sundar turned back to the boys and said, "Tomorrow, we'll call more children. We'll invite them here, and soon we'll build the real place, the place from your drawings, a place where dreams don't have walls." The boys cheered, their voices echoing against the glass, filling the room with a music so true and bright it felt like a blessing. Sundar closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of the years lift off his shoulders, placed by a warmth that spread through every corner of his being. And in that glow, he remembered the night Arjun had caught him crying. The moment he had feared was a sign of weakness. Now he saw it clearly for what it was, the first crack in his armor that allowed light to pour in, that allowed him to truly feel, to truly lead, to truly love. As they stood together, watching the sky shift into a soft purple dusk, Sundar felt a quiet whisper inside him, a whisper that sounded like his father's voice. Like Anjali's laughter, like Nirya's steady warmth, like Arjun's innocent questions, all blended together. "Right," it said, "this is your real legacy. Not the titles, not the applause, but this, the dreams you nurture, the hands you hold, the lives you change." He opened his eyes, looking at each of them, feeling a love so big it almost knocked the breath from his lungs. He knew now that no matter what storms came, no matter what challenges waited beyond this day, he had found the core of his being. He had remembered what it meant to dream and to let others dream with him. And as the final rays of sun dipped below the horizon, Sundar squeezed Nirya's hand, smiled at Arjun, and turned to Rahul with a spark in his eyes. "Are you ready to start, partner?" he asked. Rahul grinned wide, bouncing on his feet. "Yes," he shouted. Arjun laughed, joining in, their voices rising together, echoing into the deepening twilight like a promise to the world. And in that moment, surrounded by love, by new beginnings, by two small dreamers whose hands he would guide, Sundar Pichai finally felt whole.